Thank you very much. Dr. Chavan, we'll come back later to some of the points that you raised with the government, but for the time being, could you sort of outline to us the financial models that you have used in your organization?
Well, we are a not-for-profit working on the ground, so we depend a lot on donors giving us funds, and occasionally we can access government funds as well. And there's nothing innovative about that. But I particularly want to mention something that we've been trying recently, which works quite well. And we've started with a secondary school education sector. In a country like India, and I suppose a larger developing world, we find that the countries are really countries of dropouts because not many kids go past secondary education. And so we've started a program which we call Education for Education. We offer free secondary schooling help to young women who have dropped out. So these are 18-plus women. And we say that we will help you complete your secondary schooling over a period of 1 year so you can appear for a government certification examination. The only condition is that you have to repay your debt by teaching 20 children, 25 children in your own village. And I think they are very excited about that. It gives them a sense of pride that I'm not just getting it free. Although policy-wise we keep talking about giving everything free, I think pride comes from saying that I have done something to earn it. I think this is something that we have to understand. While cost should not be a barrier, but sometimes we do things that actually undermine the self-esteem and the pride of the person. And that's why people say when you give it free, people lose the value of it. And this project has actually caught on very well. We are still at a pilot stage with about 2,500 girls. 5,000 actually, we had to take only 2,500. And we are doing similar things in vocational skilling in India, where bank loans for small loans are not possible and the microfinance system has collapsed. Where we are saying, we'll give you vocational training, you learn now and pay later, completely on your own, no mortgage, no parental responsibility, and so on. And I'm happy to say that in spite of the mobility of the workforce and all sorts of things that we have, we still can recover about 60% of the cost. So I think these are some ideas that we have been trying around. And I think there's a lot. And then now the private sector, corporate sector is actually coming in saying, we would like to help you with that. For the vocational training, we'll cover the risk. If you can improve your recovery from 60% to 80%, that's great. We'll give you a liquidity to work with and sort of replenish it. So we need to look at what are the possible ways that people can be brought into the school. I also want to mention something that the government state of Bihar in India, a very backward state in India, did. The problem was there were very few high schools, few secondary schools, and girls couldn't reach there. So the chief minister of Bihar, a very remarkable man, declared that he would give girls money, the girls who completed their 8th grade, to buy a bicycle. And it was a flat program across the state, and some people said, you know, they won't really buy bicycles, the money will go this way and that way. But it happened. And girls were so happy, and you could see actually girls going. I'm not sure they were going to schools, but they were riding bicycles. And it worked very well. And then somebody told them, do you know that this is the world's largest cash transfer that you just did? And they'd not thought about that. I think there are a lot of mechanisms that can come. If you look at what the problem is, focus on the problem and the solution, innovation happens. If you just try to be innovative, sometimes you come up with ideas that don't fly.
Thank you very much, Dr. Madhav. Turning to you, Christopher, you've covered education for the Financial Times very, very broadly. But I'd like to ask you, is there not a danger that with the increase in the rise of the private education, I think we read very recently that an Indian organization called GEMS is now moving very strongly into Africa, and there's a huge demand for the private education they provide. But is there not a danger that this system will increase inequality and produce an educated elite based on the ability to pay?
Well, it is obviously possible that you'll end up within countries a situation where if fees are required to enter schools, that only the people who can afford the fees go to the schools. But I think we have to put it all in context. So the first thing is a private school isn't necessarily a privately funded school. So you could have a system where a private school is free to enter for the child either because of a voucher scheme run by the government, or you could have a system in the United Kingdom, the OECD is very keen on our university financing system, which is actually very similar to your vocational education scheme in India. So the universities cost up to £9,000 a year in England. So not everyone can, well, few people actually could come up with £9,000 of cash each year to turn up to the university. So what they do is a system where the government pays the fees up front, and then you don't pay anything back until you are yourself earning enough money to pay off the loan. It's a clever system because it means if you become unemployed, the repayments just freeze. You don't have to pay anything. And that's a situation where you have private institutions charging very high fees, and the people themselves are able to take responsibility for their, for the courses. They have a stake, right? They're paying, and yet you have equity of access. And one of the very odd things that we found is that even as fees rise, poor children in particular aren't put off from going to university, which is amazing. So we have a situation where we've managed to combine responsibility for the quality of the course on the student, right? The student knows, I'm paying £9,000 for this. I want enough hours in the week. I want to know what I'm going to get. I want my essays marked overnight. And at the same time, everyone can go. So I think it'd be unwise to sort of take a sort of view that there's sort of a binary divide between private and public, and this necessarily means inequality. The other very, very simple point is that the really grotesque inequality in the world today is between the developing world and the developed world. If you can get GEMS or another big corporate provider, the Financial Times, I should declare, is owned by Pearson, which is a giant education company. I have no idea what they're doing. They don't tell me, and we're completely independent, but should mention that. If they were to go in and they were to open 150 schools and make tens of millions of dollars out of it, and they were to increase inequality in, say, Mali, this would be bad within Mali. But equally, it would be reducing the inequality between Mali and the rest of the world. And that's the really big game here. Improving education is almost certainly going to mean, in the short term, increases in inequality of education within the places we're improving. But in the long run, the game is about getting everyone up over the line.
Well, and that's a very interesting theory, Dr. Abu-Ghazaleh. Do you agree that there are several different races being run? On the one hand, you have the national race, if you like, where the quality might increase. On the other hand, your best students will be more equal globally.
Permit me, please, to mention that at least two of my colleagues here on the panel, we are working with you on the Talal Abu-Ghazaleh University project. We signed an agreement with Pearson to deliver all their courses online all over the world. And we are in discussion with the World Bank, and we're about to sign an agreement with the United Nations also to deliver capacity building programs for government employees, for staff in government. So what we're doing is we believe in proliferating excellent programs for everybody's use. Now, I don't know if this is the time to talk about private versus public, if that is part of the question. I have a report here which is produced by US News and World Report, which says the top 20 universities in the US are private. The Forbes magazine says 90% of the top 100 universities are private. No, there is nothing wrong with private. And then when we talk about whether private making education commercial or profit-oriented is wrong, all the best universities are, most of them at least, by far most. And I serve today on the panel of experts of the World Trade Organization. The World Trade Organization formed a panel to look at how to shape the future of trade. And part of my mission is to talk about how education can promote trade and how to promote trade in education services, because WTO looks at education as a trade. It's called trade in educational services because it's a service for which you pay price. And I'm concentrating in my report, which I will be submitting to the ministerial meeting of the World Trade Organization, on how education can play a major role in promoting trade, and not just trade for the sake of trade, not just for the sake of knowledge. And as a businessman, I always want to look at the bottom line. Every educator looks at education. Great, we must be educated. Educated for what? I want education for development. I want education for better citizenship. I want education for better economies, benefits for the citizen. So my focus is on how education can make the life of the individual better.
Thank you very much. But before we get to your level of education, which we agree with totally, we still have the problem of elementary education. So I'm going to turn now to Dr. Petrinos. I think you will agree with me that with the rise of private schools, huge numbers of, the quality sometimes is very, very dubious. And some institutions quite clearly set up on a business model. The aim is profit. What can you do about it? Is it possible to do anything about it to make sure that the quality is at least acceptable?
Well, there's a lot you can do, and many people are already doing it. I return to the example of the Punjab in Pakistan. The government program was designed to assess the schools, the private schools that were focusing on the poor, to publish information and then use that information to finance those schools that were doing well. And that information and financing resulted in better outcomes for those children in those better performing private schools. And those schools expanded while the poor schools decreased in size and eventually left the market, meaning that the remaining good private schools took that share. What we do in terms of trying to assess these questions, important questions about quality and especially equity, we have a 4-point program for assessing the policies towards the private sector in education. And these 4 points include competition. One element of having a diverse supply is that you create a competitive environment which should result in better outcomes for everyone. The second item is autonomy. If you want to give the providers the chance to improve outcomes, they need to be able to make decisions about how to use their resources and their pedagogical models. Third, we believe in the policies about information. So does the public, do parents know how the schools are performing and what they can do about it? And this includes the question of equity. So to us, a private school that contributes to social goals is a school that has open access. It's not a selective school, especially if it receives public funding. And the fourth element is the accountability system. And this is probably the most important function of governments at the basic education level, is providing for society a guarantee about the quality of schools and taking action when those levels, those standards are not achieved. And part of that could be information simply, and could work in a system of choice. It could also be to take action in terms of reducing funding if that's available to those private schools. So I think it's an important question, but there are tools available and tools that are that have teeth that can actually change the education landscape.